So in the first assignment, we looked at classical paintings and the way they constructed them. We looked at directional forces and all those things, right? So we went through the elements of art and the organizing principles in the first slideshow as well. So you got to start thinking about all of those things when you are designing your projects, okay? We're going to be working from reference this time, but we're going to be abstracting that reference, and all those same rules apply. You're going to have to look for a good image, and I'll go over that when we get into the assignment sheet itself. You're going to have to look for a good image that exhibits good design, and then your drawings, which will fundamentally change what the design looks like, will have to have those same characteristics to it as well. Does that make sense to everybody? Everybody online? You all good? Okay. So we're going to talk about abstraction. When you look at things, you usually think about the imagery that's being represented, and you usually think about like the subject, the story it's telling. Now, what we're going to start doing with this project is we're going to break things down into shapes and thinking about how those shapes relate to each other as pure design, separate from the subject matter of the picture. Those things have to work together, but we have to break it down to simple shapes first. So we're going to think in terms of like rectangles, squares, circles. And we're going to think of the imagery that we're going to choose as simple shapes before you think about what the picture's of. That make sense? Any questions about that? All right, so we're going to talk about abstraction a little bit. Abstraction is artistic distortion. And it's from the Latin abs, meaning away from, and trahere, meaning to draw. So that doesn't really make sense, drawing away from, but it'll make sense as we go. It's the process of taking away or removing characteristics from something in order to reduce it to an essential set of characteristics. So when I say essential set of characteristics, what's important to the picture and the shapes that are important to the picture, and ignoring all the finite or the minute detail when you're drawing or painting or whatever you're doing. It's not a new technique. If anything, it's older than realism. Okay. Realism, who's had art history in here or online? You having it right now? So when do you start the art history, right? What dates does it really start on when you're just studying it?
The Renaissance, like at least.
Oh, you're doing Renaissance to modern?
Yeah.
I'm in the
Before 1400. So when did they, like, what date did you start with?
like 38,000 BC or something.
Yeah. Yeah, like 35 to 38,000 years ago, right? And those images that you see in like the cave paintings, are they realistic?
Not really.
Yeah, exactly. So it's abstraction. They're drawing pictures to represent what they're seeing. And, you know, they haven't had the history of art that we've had, because we have 35 to 38,000 years of art history that we can refer back to. Those people didn't. So they may have been trying for realism, but it ends up being abstraction because they're not putting every little detail in and making it look like a fully rendered image. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. So early forms of image making were more decidedly abstract than replicating reality. These are the cave drawings at Lascaux, and I know you've looked at caves that are older than this, correct? In your art history class? Because this is 27,000 years.
Yeah, we are still there.
And they discovered a cave, I think, was it in Spain?
I think it's in France.
France, okay. This one's in France as well. But these are decidedly abstract. So when you look at these, what is this? Yeah, some kind of bull. I don't know what species or anything. And what's this in the background? A horse. And is it realistic? Or is it simplified? Okay. So when we're talking about abstraction, we're talking about simplification. It doesn't mean it can't be a complex shape or a complex image, but it's the shapes themselves are simplified and reduced to essential characteristics. There's another one, the shaft of the dead man. They think this guy was a shaman because he had a duck on a stick, but they don't know for sure. They also assign like religious meaning to these. And it could be, but it could just be somebody that liked to draw. And, you know, that's probably not popular among art historians because they like to put heavy things on it. But I like to draw and I draw stupid things. And like, I've drawn stupid things big. And these aren't stupid, but maybe they just wanted to draw what they were seeing because they figured out a way to render things out and, you know, they found a big canvas to put it on. But that's all conjecture, so don't take it to heart. Then there's the pre-Incan ruins at Tiwanaku in Bolivia. These are more recent. These are like 1,000 years old or 500 to 1,000 years old. But that's decidedly abstract as well, right? What's that representing? A person. Yeah, it's simplified. Now, part of the reason they have to make things look this way is because they're limited by their materials. But they also are stylizing. And if you look at like pre-Incan ruins and Incan ruins and Aztec ruins, there's some realism involved in some of the things you see that are carved out of like that hard stone. But in this case, it's decidedly abstract. It's a simplification of form. Also, Egyptian hieroglyphs. Now, who's ever learned anything about Egyptian hieroglyphs? What'd you learn about them?
They're just like symbols or something, it's kind of like a language almost.
It is a language. Now, they are symbols and they're obviously imagery, but each of those symbols represents a sound. So these are abstractions of things they see to create symbols for like sounds that come out of your mouth, like syllables. That makes sense? And then they'll put a few together to make a specific word. You remember how they discovered how to translate it?
The Rosetta Stone.
Rosetta Stone, that's correct. This isn't really art history class, but I think the Rosetta Stone is beautiful. Easter Island, who's ever seen these? What are they called? What's that? Moai. Moai. So they believe that these were vessels to house the souls of their dead ancestors. And these are all over Easter Island or Rapa Nui, as they call it. And they all face the interior of the island, which I found out a few years ago. And I think that's pretty fascinating because you always see a picture of some sitting on a hill and it feels like they're looking out over the ocean, but they're all facing inward. So they're looking back in to take care of the people that were living there. The history of that island is really interesting too, if you want to read about it sometime. They thought they were the last survivors of a great flood. And then like Western imperialists showed up in the 1600s, I think. That would blow your mind though, wouldn't it? Like
Yeah.
a big sailing ship just sails into the, yeah. They were, by that time, there had been a lot of warring on the island and it was deforested and the people that were on the island were in bad shape. So still really interesting. Kanji, what is kanji? Does anybody know what kanji is?
It's like one of like the 3 or 4 languages that they like the written languages anyway.
In Japan.
Yeah.
Yep. So it's a written language in Japan. There's like 30,000 symbols. I guess most people can get away with like 2,000. So nobody, like, not a lot of people know the whole alphabet. But what these are, if you look at these are symbols. Now, if you look at earlier versions of the writing of the language, they were pictures. It was little pictures of like houses and things. And when they get to it, it got more abstract as time went by the repeated writing of the symbols. They became more stylized and less recognizable as objects themselves. But like, I think man looks like a man, and I think woman looks like a woman. In a way, you just got to think about it in a reduction to essential forms. That makes sense, everyone? So according to the definition by the National Gallery, works of art that reframe nature for expressive effect are called abstract. So when you're doing this abstraction, it's based on a feeling, really. Like, and I'm going to talk about that a lot this semester. There's a lot of art teachers that'll tell you it's not about feeling, but you got to feel it to understand the language because it's trying to communicate something. That makes sense? It's most often applied to works in which simplification is visually obvious and important to the final pictorial effect. So when you look at this, what does that look like? Don't read the title. Look at that. What does that look like? Bridge, right? Is it day or night? Night, right? Now, if you look at that imagery, those shapes are very simplified. He's giving you the impression of that bridge without drawing every little detail of the bridge. And it's almost more realistic this way. You get the atmosphere of the picture. This is by Whistler. Who's ever heard of Whistler? Ever see the painting of Whistler's mother? It's a famous man. That's all right. You don't need to see it. It's cool though. All right. So this is another one by Whistler. It's called Nocturne in Black and Gold, The Falling Rocket. What do you think this represents? That's for people online too. Feel free to speak up. Jesse, what do you think that is?
I don't know, I'm thinking.
Is it like nighttime and there's
It's
stars?
definitely nighttime. What do you think this is down here? A beach, yeah. So if we look at it, it's kind of the same setup as the previous picture almost. There's a little beach there too, right? What else is going on? Okay, so I'm going to tell you, this represents fireworks. Okay. Now there's something really interesting about this painting. There was a famous art critic at the time who nobody remembers, but everybody remembers Whistler, which I think is appropriate. That declared this not art because they always had salons at the end of the year where the greatest artists in the world would hang in these shows, and a critic would come around and talk to him, and the most critically acclaimed would kind of be the it artist for the year. Does that make sense? So everybody saw their work out. And what happened is when this guy declared this not a piece of art, Whistler took him to court. And there's a whole transcript of the court case, which is really funny because all they do is insult each other the whole time. Like the whole text is these two guys like hating each other, insulting each other. So it's hilarious. But in the end, spoiler alert, Whistler ends up winning the case. So he gets it declared a piece of art by law, which I think is really, really funny. And he was exploring, this is kind of early abstraction. So he's exploring abstraction and somebody's telling him no, and he's saying yes.
Maybe fireworks looked like that more back then. I don't know. Our fireworks look really like, I don't know, spiritual now.
Right. And this is like, it's the falling rocket. So it could be after it explodes too. And you know, sometimes the sparks kind of flutter. I don't know if sparks flutter, but they flutter down.
I figured those were stars. So then I like focused more on like the background, what was going on.
Yeah.
I saw like the dark on the left. It kind of looked like either trees to me or like, I don't know, cliffs.
Yeah. I really like you can smell this painting. Because you ever been at fireworks and you see the smoke after and it stinks? And I think this is interesting here. It looks like a figure watching it, but it's just an impression of a figure. I like that painting a lot. This is by an artist named Arshio Gorky. It was done in 1943. This is an abstraction of his garden in Sochi. Okay. Anybody see a garden in there? So these are aspects that he's seeing, right? He's picking and choosing what he wants to put in the picture. And then he's putting them in a pleasing composition on the picture plane. Do you like the painting at all, even though you can't recognize it? It's okay if you don't. You do like it? I think it's interesting. The colors are nice.
Yeah.
I don't know what it represents. I think this could possibly be a cat. I've always thought that. But you got some like organic type of shapes. This could be a fall scene where the garden's dead. Yeah, but he's giving the impression of the garden without doing a realistic picture of the garden. That makes sense, everybody? Who's like in your own history hates abstract art or doesn't like abstract art? Anybody? Jesse doesn't. It's okay to admit it.
Not huge on it.
You don't have to love it, but like
Yeah.
hopefully I can give you. What'd you say, Tay?
No, I was just saying I'm not the biggest fan of it. I thought that too was a cat. I like the colors of it, but I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I like some abstract art if I can still tell what it is, but like if this you said it's supposed to be a garden, it doesn't look anything like a garden to me, so I don't really like
Yeah.
it.
Green.
So random.
But it could be a garden in the fall where everything's dying too.
Right, that's, I like.
Well, yeah, but like in terms of like the shapes, it doesn't really look like a garden to me. Like I can see like a little bit of like leaves at the top.
Yep.
Right.
And that's basically what he's doing. He's taking those aspects, reframing them and make a composition that he likes.
Yeah,
He's-
I guess that works, but
He's trying to give you the impression of it. And you don't have to like it. Not everybody likes abstract art. It's fine. Everybody has their different tastes. You just got to understand what he's doing. And that's why I'm showing you this.
right.
So when applied to visual art, abstraction always means an overriding concern with the internal design of a work of art rather than the relationship of the work of art to reality. So it's obviously not reality. Does that make sense? So maybe you all like this one a little better because it's got some really good colors. But what is this? Boat. How many boats? Could be 4. Could be 3. I see 3 in a dock. Can you all buy that? And this could be the sun or the moon. But did you guys interpret that as the sun or the moon? The moon? Okay. So this is in the evening scene, right before sunset. Y'all get that feeling from it? And then red sky at night. Say this is a happy scene if it's evening. It's a scary scene if it's morning, right? Yeah, which I think is interesting too. But this is supposed to represent the fading light of a July day at a pier. Can you all see that there? Now you see those as boats, but look at the shapes. They're reduced to the ultimate and essential form that you can still tell it's a boat, but it's not a drawing of a boat. Make sense? But it gives you the impression of that whole scene, yet it's simplified and it's very easy to read, which I think is really good. It's not cluttered. This is a native mask from Prince William Sound. It looks like a face. Do you see that? You also see the human figure in the middle of it.
I didn't notice the human figure until you like said something about it. And then I was like, oh, I see it.
Yep. I like it. Okay, so not all abstract. I've shown you things that result in geometric conclusions now, right? Everything is kind of squared off in geometric shapes, even if they're not like perfectly symmetrical shapes or geometric. Not all, except for the garden at Sochi. Not all abstract necessarily results in a geometric conclusion. An abstraction can result in imagery that is not directly derived from natural references. Abstract shapes that allude to natural organic forms but are not directly derived from nature are referred to as biomorphic shapes. Now, this is not on any test, but you just got to keep in mind, you got geometric abstraction, you got biomorphic abstraction, okay? And this is considered the first abstract watercolor that's fully abstract, that's referring to things without showing things, okay? And he said this relates to the reality that's around them. It looks like a mess to me. I don't love it. But Kandinsky took credit for being the first like truly abstract artist. But I'm going to show you the patriarchy in art, okay? Because Hilda af Klimt did it in 1907. And this is biomorphic as well, but this isn't showing an imagery of anything, right? This refers to biological shapes without showing it. So I think that's really interesting that he gets the credit, even though there was an earlier people. And there were more people that did it earlier. I just want to show you that she was ignored. And I like this painting a lot. Now this is William de Kooning. This is called Woman One. Do you think he liked this woman? It's his ex-wife. Yeah. He gave her hooves. But this is worth like $50 million. I probably wouldn't pay that for it, but I still like it. Here's an interesting one. This is Lee Krasner. She was an artist. She was married to Jackson Pollock. You've all heard of Jackson Pollock, right? Okay, so this is called Gothic landscape. When you look at this, how would you imagine a Gothic landscape to look? And you can think goth kids. What kind of landscape would they like to hang out in? Dark. What else?
I guess like all like buildings.
Buildings, there's other possibilities too. A graveyard.
Is it spray painted? Kind of looks like.
No, this is painted with a brush. Okay, so when we look at this, I want you to imagine this when you're looking at it. Dead trees. I also want you to imagine a graveyard with a wrought iron gate. And I want you to imagine like the moon. So all of those impressions, you guys gave me a description of the painting. And you get that feeling of the Gothic landscape without it being a literal translation of a Gothic landscape. That make sense, everybody? Yeah. So this is taking what she's thinking about or looking at and representing it without being literal about it. This is actually kind of hard to do, to give that impression. I know it looks like a simple painting, and you always hear people say, my kid can paint that. Your kid could absolutely not paint this. Unless they were a truly like Picasso-esque gifted kid. All right. Where did everybody go? You all disappeared. Come back. So abstraction in its common usage can refer to pure forms. That's not the best way to describe pure forms. We describe them as non-objective. So when you're thinking of non-objective paintings, we're talking like Jackson Pollock and those type of paintings. The painting is not supposed to, and in movies, you see people looking at Jackson Pollock's and they're like, I see this and this in it. And it's not supposed to be like that. You're not supposed to be looking for things in the painting. The painting is designed that refers only to itself. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And in some ways that's safer. Something interesting about abstract expressionism, there was a funding of it by the CIA. And the reason for that, and they used to hang it in government buildings in the 50s and 60s. The reason for it is because it's apolitical. It doesn't cause like, because a lot of art is political. This is not. The only politics in it is like changing the way we think about things. Okay. So non-objective art is art that only refers to itself. So when we look at this is supposed to be pure design. This is a painting that only refers to itself. Now, there's things about non-objective art that I think is failing, because if you make a red painting that's apple red, you're going to think apples. So there's a reference to nature there anyway. But I think the goal is good, that they're trying to make a painting that only refers to itself. They're making strokes for the sake of making the strokes, and they're arranging them on the picture plane in a pleasing way. I like this guy a lot. His name's Franz Klein. And he's called an abstract expressionist. Robert Motherwell is an abstract expressionist as well. Now, I love this painting. And now this painting, as we look at it on our computer screen, is fairly small, right? But it's like 20 feet across. So this would be a lot more imposing if you saw it in person, because those blacks are deep blacks. They're very heavy. So it gives you emotion when you look at it. Can you all buy that? Even if you're not getting emotion from my computer screen. I mean, that's a little better, but that's still small up there on the screen. This is a Jackson Pollock. Now, Jackson Pollock's trying to show the action of creating the art within the art, as well as taking into consideration design aspects. I like this one a lot. Who hates this? Who absolutely just despises this? Anybody? Or who can take it or leave it? That's fair. I like it a lot. So levels of abstraction can vary, and this is relates directly to your next assignment. And I'm going to go through it. This is a reduction to essential forms. They're flattening out the picture plane. You see that? This is Matisse, La Danse, 1909. And you'll see a lot of the early ones started around, like right around 1900. There was some stuff done in the 1880s, 1890s. But like 1900 to 1920 was when it was really becoming in vogue. So most artists started doing it. And Matisse and Picasso were huge leaders in it. And Picasso, like this is Matisse. Picasso idolized Matisse. Matisse came a little bit before Picasso. And Picasso felt like he could never keep up with Matisse. And I personally like Picasso's work better, so I'm like, what is he talking about? But that's okay. This is Vasily Kandinsky. He's the one that did that first abstract watercolor. But this is called the Blue Rider or Der Blau Reiter. But does everybody see the Blue Rider in there? And this is a group that he belonged to, the Blue Rider group. And this is like the poster for it, or the cover of the pamphlet for it. I like that a lot. You all like that? It's kind of modern in its design. Like it looks like it was done either in the 60s or by some hipster kid in the 2010. Yeah, I dig it. This is New Descending Staircase. When you look at this, hey Tay.
Yes.
When you look at this, do you see a nude descending a staircase? How about Jesse?
I see the figures, I think, a bit, and then I can see like in the background.
Yep. So when we look at this painting, if you had a realist doing a nude descending staircase, what would it look like? One figure. And would that figure be descending? Or would it be static? It'd be static, right? It would be standing still. Now, what this painting does, it depicts the entire action of a nude descending a staircase. So can you all see the figure? So this, if you can't, this is the head, right? This is the torso. This is the hip. This is one leg that's bent and one leg that's extended. And that figure is repeated over and over and laying over itself as you go down the staircase. So it's tracing the whole action of the nude descending the staircase. And it's just a different way of thinking about how you depict it without doing it. And the interesting thing about this is look at the date. They were doing long stroke. I mean, photography and painting at the time, ever since photography came into existence, had a close relationship. And painters used photography. Photography tried to imitate painting. So, I mean, there's a lot of give and take there. I think it's pretty fun. Now, this one's very abstract, wouldn't you say? This is by a guy named Pierre Mondrian. And he said this related to the landscape around him. I think it's utter crap that he said that. Maybe the first one did, but he did these same paintings over and over, and he did thousands of them. I can't see them all being the same. I think he just found a formula that sold for him. Yeah, I don't dislike it, but I think he's full of it. And again, that's not gospel. I'm just this is all conjecture. Okay, so George O'Keeffe, Radiator Building, 1926. You all see New York buildings with a steamy, like, kind of environment? Well, that's because Batman is referring to this. Like all those, not just this, but have you ever heard of Art Deco? There were a lot of paintings done and illustrations even later on that represented Art Deco of cities with steam. All that stuff that you see from Batman is Art Deco. And it's styling after that movement. Yeah, and this is done around the same time, but she wasn't part of the Art Deco movement. Now, if you look at this, you see the steam, right? This is obviously a building, but she's not actually painting the building. She's just painting the windows against black, which is pretty sharp. What do you think this is? Yeah, it's a lit up sign, like some kind of advertising sign. Doesn't matter what it says, it just gives you the impression. And even today, if you look up in New York or some big city with skyscrapers on a steamy night, it'll look like this. This is again Kandinsky. This is supposed to relate to some sort of environment. It's called soft pressure. I don't know what it is, but the arrangement is interesting. I think there's some competing focal points in it though. This is Guernica. Who's ever seen this? Pretty dramatic painting. Now, this is a reduction to essential forms. But this also has something in it called arbitrary value. And in the next assignment, you're gonna have to do arbitrary value. And it's hard for people to understand. So I'm gonna explain a little here and I'll explain it when we're going through the assignment. You see how there's values running across forms and through forms? And when I'm talking about value, what am I talking about? Shading, lights and darks, right? So the shading in this is not realistic. Would you agree? It's not trying to create rounded forms. It's being used as a directional force on top of the line drawing to help carry us around the picture plane. So it's almost like creating arrows. Does that make sense? All right. So this is arbitrary value. It runs through forms. You see how it goes from here through here, continues down here. This value here is just to continue that line, even when you get up into here, to carry you to the candle, right? And there's other shapes in here that point you around the picture plane as well, but the values are working to do the same thing. And it's as simple as that. Don't overthink arbitrary value. It's just non-realistic value to create directional forces and put emphasis on things. Make sense? There's another Matisse, Blue Nude. Anybody ever been to Kalamazoo Institute of Arts? No? There's one of these in there. Helen Frankenthaler, Mountains and Sea. Can you all see the mountains? What'd you say, I guess?
Yeah,
Kind of. Can you see the sea? Can you see some red there? I don't know what the red is, right? So let me explain what's going on here. She's looking at a scenery, right? She might have been on location when she was painting this, or she might have visited and decided to paint it later. Now, if you've ever been to like Northern California, who's ever been to Northern California here? Along the coast, anybody? There's a lot of green rolling hills that go right down to the ocean. So imagine this being one of those hills going down to the ocean. But she's also put the ocean over here, up here. She's not confined to the realistic view of a landscape. She's taking part of those landscapes and rearranging it around the picture plane. That makes sense. And who knows what the red is? Who knows what the yellow is? The yellow might even be a sailboat. I don't know. But you're not supposed to think of it like this is a picture of this. You're supposed to say, I get the feeling of looking at a landscape without showing an actual landscape. So when you look at this, this is recognizably an abstract figure. This gives you the impression of a landscape. So there's two different forms of abstraction there, and one is a little more extreme than the other. Make sense? Make sense to everybody online? Don't zone out online. You'll be getting in-person ones too. I split them up so it's equal. Okay, so we see this picture. Is this abstract? Have you all seen this painting before? It's a really famous painting of Washington crossing the Delaware. I like it a lot. I think it's awesome. It's huge and it's beautiful. It's also like way too idealized and silly. So in 1953, there's an artist named Larry Rivers, and he's a beat artist. Who's ever heard of beat poetry? Anybody in here? Or Jack Kerouac? Well, they were these rebel writers and musicians, jazz musicians like John Coltrane. Who's the guy that did Bitches Brew? Hugely famous, Miles Davis. So you've heard those names, right? Even if you don't know about those, they were a movement that were all doing beat art. It was all based on beats, like, but it was also based on, as Jack Kerouac put it, being broke. It was post World War II people, and they were all really young and rebel artists at the time. Okay, and it's a really like idolized movement. So anyway, this is a painting by Emmanuel Lutz, and it was done in 1851. Larry Rivers did his snarky version of it in 1953. And it's supposed to refer to the other one and be kind of silly at the same time. Mark Rothko. Who likes this painting? You like it? That's cool. Who would like this painting better if it was 8 feet tall? Yeah. So this is a big painting. Now, this was done, I think there's 4 paintings. They made an installation that was called the Chapel, I think. I can't remember exactly. But Mark Rothko did 4 of these paintings that are kind of depressing in that chapel, right? Now, Mark Rothko did the same formula for all his paintings. They were color field paintings with nice edges and nice movement of paint within. They're really interesting to look at. If you don't like them, that's fine. I love them. And he's hugely famous, and his paintings sell for $100 million, like just insane prices. And I don't want to mean that money makes the art better, but the appreciation is there. Now, the thing about Mark Rothko, if you look at his paintings in order, you can tell he's going to kill himself because of the colors he's using. So I think that's really interesting too. Yeah, he killed himself. I think he was in the 60s. This is Nathan Oliveira, seated figure with pink background. You can see the seated figure, right? Anybody having trouble seeing the seated figure? All right. This is another Nathan Oliveira. This is couple with red. I still don't see a couple. I've showed this a million times. Anybody else see a couple? I see the red. Still a nice painting though. This is Jean-Michel Basquiat. Anybody ever hear of him? You like his stuff? Yeah, I love it. You like his stuff? Yeah. Anybody online ever heard of him? Amazing artist from the 80s, died at 28 from a heroin overdose. But hugely, he does African American subjects, but he also kept science books. And who's ever seen a little crown put on anime characters and things like that? And like other artists will put crowns in their work. I want you to keep in mind it all comes from Basquiat. They're ripping off Basquiat when they do it, or it's homage to Basquiat. But you got to keep that in mind that like that is not something they thought of. Basquiat did it first. I'm a huge fan of his. He was amazing. I wish he would have lived longer. I probably would have tried to find him and talk to him. But yeah, great. This is Wade Tebow, Apartment Hill. Okay, so this is Apartment Hill in San Francisco. And really, like, the colors are beautiful. This painting is about 6 to 8 feet tall. So when you're standing in front of it, the colors really sparkle. And it's got a little bit of gloss to it, so it's a beautiful painting. You guys like it?
Oh, yeah.
Even on the screen. And you can tell what it is, right? It's apartments on a hill. If you've ever been to San Francisco, like I lived in San Francisco for a while, I know exactly where this is, but it's not framed in the way it looks. So I know this building and how it sets up against this building, and I know this color. This is sunset West Coast color, low in the evening West Coast color. Colors are more beautiful on the West Coast, and I have no idea why. I think it's the weather system. But they're more vibrant when you see things. So if you see a bright color in that light, it's amazing. In Michigan, we get purples in the winter. It's very sad. And the summer's really green. Okay, so when we look at this, there's a lot of sparkly color in here. You get the impression of Apartment Hill. All of these, they kind of line up like this, but they're not exactly like this. But the thing I want to point out is there's no part on Apartment Hill that's this open. And over here, this little freeway here, if you were standing on Apartment Hill, you would not see a freeway down there. You would have to look way off on the horizon and you would see a freeway. And if you can all see my finger on the screen, I'm going to show the class, it would look that big rather than that big. So he's reframed the scene that he's looking at into a more pleasing composition to fit the stuff he wants in it. Does that make sense? This is Wayne Tebow again, same guy. This is a river farm study. Can you all see the river? How do you know it's a river? The reflection of the tree. And it's just a simple detail that, and it's abstract, it's simplified, but it's a reflection of the tree. And again, the layering of the paint, that red over the green, That just sparkles when you see them. So there's abstract. I almost worked with this guy. I was doing like just, here's a little story. I was doing just like some organizing for a production that was being done in LA. I wasn't doing any of the art on it. But they were like, Wayne Tebow's going to do the backgrounds. And I'm like, awesome. Because like, he's a hugely famous fine artist. And I was so excited because I was going to steal one. Yeah, I was like, I can't wait till those come in. I'm taking one home with me. But then they canceled the project because they didn't know how to protect his art. If you-
Oh my gosh.
So I think they were perfectly right in doing it. I'm not the reason they canceled it, but like, I would have been. Yeah. Yeah, so don't tell anybody. I can't believe I just confessed that. Yes, I can. Okay. So there's abstraction in other forms of art as well. You can think about it in any form. You could do it in interior design, you can do it in architecture, you can do it in sculpture, you can do it in photography. I'm gonna show you some of those. So this is Jean Arp or Jean Arp. I should know how to pronounce that, but I never have. There's one of these at the DIA. Who's ever seen it? Anybody? Who's ever been to the DIA? Who knows what the DIA is? It's a beautiful museum in Detroit. It's the Detroit Institute of the Arts. It's right near CCS. You have been there?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, but there's one of these there, and it's really nice. But this is a evocation of a human form, comma luna, comma spectral. And when you look at this, I don't want you to think of it as an actual figure. I want you to think of it as alluding to a human figure. Can you see that in it? There's just some bumps and lumps that look human. Now here's one by Henry Moore. This is a three-piece figure number 2. It's a bridge prop. Now, when you look at this, what do you think it's abstraction of? You can see what it's abstracted if you look really close. A bathtub? I can see that. What's that? High heels? Anybody else see anything? Okay, stick with me on this one. This is what I think it is. And all those impressions are okay to have, like you can see those things. But I see this as a head. Can you buy that? I see this kind of as shoulders and the legs of a couch coming together. I see this as the body in the middle of the couch. I see this as 2 knees coming up and being cut off at the ankle. So it's a person and a couch coming together and split into 3 parts. Can you all see that? Jesse, or were you raising your hand or going like this?
I was going like so.
So?
Yeah.
But that's what I see. But it's an interesting form regardless, and it's big in bronze. So if it's bronze, it's all automatically cool, right? Because it's just the process of making it. So this is architecture. Who's ever seen this before? Have you? Oh, you've seen the slide, some of this slideshow before because I showed you it in 2D or in Digital Foundations. So, do you remember the story behind it? Okay, so this is done by Frank Gehry. Frank Gehry is a famous architect worldwide, and this is supposed to allude to waveforms. Can you all buy that? Like it looks like waves and movement and things like that. Now, the interesting about this is in downtown LA. And this is the front side. On the back side, there's a sidewalk and you can go up and touch the building. But across the street from that is a giant apartment complex. So when they put this in, and they're swanky apartments, so they're really expensive, right? When they first put this in, it's shiny and it was reflecting sunlight into the apartment buildings and make them 30 degrees warmer during the day. So I think they either complained to the city or they sued the concert or Disney, and they had to go back and buff out the part that was reflecting into the apartment building so that they wouldn't be so hot in the summertime. Pretty fun. This is in the Chicago Museum of Contemporary Art. Anybody ever been there? Do you remember the staircase in it? I forgot about it, and I was in there 2 years ago. I'm like, hey, that's in my slideshow. Yeah, so this is just interior staircase. What does it look like? especially at the top,
So what do you mean at the top?
like right here.
That looks like skylight to me.
Yeah, but like, if you think of it as a form, like an abstracted form, it is a skylight. It looks like a leaf, right? Do you see the organic forms here? So it's interior architecture that has to give you, or is meant to give you the impression of organic forms. Plus, there's a lot of wood on it. So it's a reflection of the materials as well. This is abstract photography with the playing of the light on the wall. I don't love this. I don't like it at all, really, but that's okay. I understand. This is another abstract photograph. This is an abstract image of a body in a curve. So when you look at this, you can get an impression of where it is on a human body, but you're not quite sure where. Wouldn't you say? What do you think? You say ear?
It's like right here.
Could be the pit of the neck.
Oh, yeah, that makes more sense.
Could be the back of a knee. It could be like they grabbed a handful of flesh and squished it all together too. You just don't know.
Oh, I-
Yeah, but I buy that it's the pit or the pit where the collarbone is, but I'm not 100% sure either. Because I feel like we would see more structure right through here of bone. And we don't. It's interesting though. And we know it's skin because of the pores and you can see the wrinkles and stuff. Here is abstraction in ceramics. So that's way out there. And this is a little more approachable. This guy just makes really, I don't really love these sculptures, but he does a lot of them in their major cities all over the world.
The shadow itself on a sculpture looks like a woman.
Yep, there's a face too. Do you see it? Yeah. All right, so the next step, or the next thing I'm going to show you is a guy named Richard Diebenkorn. There's a great Diebenkorn at the Grand Rapids Public Museum, or the Grand Rapids Art Museum, and I think it's the best painting in there. It's worth like $50 million too. So like, just go grab it. Don't go grab it. I'm not endorsing that, but like it's beautiful. But anyway, I'm going to show you Richard Diebenkorn and kind of an evolution of his abstraction. I've shown you his paintings before. So the first one is this. And I want you to look at the dates when we're looking at these. This is called Freeway and an Aqueduct. And obviously we see a road and an aqueduct and some grass, right? Everybody see that? And it's a nice painted scene. It's obviously simplified. It's obviously a reduction to essential forms, right? Then we get to this one. And do you remember that interior I showed you in the when we were talking about directional forces and eye moving around a painting? The female and the male, and then the doorway off to the other side of the picture. This is the same artist. It was kind of painted in the same style. So this is obviously an interior with a book. He flattens out the front of the picture plane. It kind of just drops towards us. But he's still saying somewhat realistic. That's 1959. By 1963, he's flattening things out more. And this is poppies on a table. I don't know what the red, white, and blue in the background is, but I think that's an interesting painting of a glass too. The reflections are really good on it, even though they're super simplified. Diebenkorn's awesome. This is like the one that's in the museum. This is called Ingleside. And if you've ever been to Ingleside, you feel like you're there when you look at this painting. The grays are perfect. It feels a little bit of misty. It doesn't feel like we're getting a lot of direct sunlight. Can you all see that?
So which museum is this in? I think I've seen this one.
The Grand Rapids Art Museum.
Okay,
Yeah. It's pretty big. Did you like it?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, you don't have to, and you don't have to agree with me that it's the best painting in there. There's other really good paintings in there. So that's just my opinion. Now, when we look at this, it's getting flatter in the background, but the front is still a realistic space. And then we go here, and we seem to have elevated our point of view a little, and it's flattening out even more. And he's starting to play with large areas of color. Right? And this is 1963. And then he went for an airplane ride with his friend, and he started looking down on San Francisco from a different point of view. Then he started painting like this. This is the Ocean Park series. Now, Ocean Park is right by the bay in San Francisco. And what's the big famous thing in San Francisco? Say it loud. Yeah, the Golden Gate Bridge. And what color is it? Red. So where's the bridge in this? At the top. Okay, also in Ocean Park, there's a beach. Where's the beach? Well, that's the water. This stuff? Yep. And what do you think this is? Don't think of the shape. Like, just think of the color. Could be tree. What else could it be? Grass, right? What do you think this is? Who's ever seen seagrass, like brown grass growing across near the ocean? Okay, that's what that is. What do you think this is? There's a concrete sidewalk that runs up a walking path through Ocean Park. So when you're there, you'd see all these elements. And what he's done is he's taken his point of view and he's taking things he sees and maybe he's framing them. I don't know how he does it exactly, but he might be framing it so he can see that little snippet of color in his point of view. And then he's rearranging them on the picture plane. So he's taking proportions of color he sees and rearranging them into a pleasing composition. That makes sense? What's the primary focal point of this picture? Would you say this right here? I would say this too. I wouldn't say this is a big painting too, so you can't focus on that all at once. But the contrast of this is making it stand out. So when you look at this and what we talked about in the last slideshow, you still have all the directional forces there that carry around the picture. All the design concerns are there, and he's just being inspired by his landscape and reframing it. Make sense? Here's another one. This one shows more of the sidewalk. We still have the bridge. We still have the bay. We still have seagrass. We still have sand. This has more of the grass. There's an area of Ocean Park that's all grass right up to the water. And we still have the bridge. And we still have, this might be seagrass. Okay, so now let's look at a few things, and I'm going to go over them again when we go through the assignment itself, and then I'm going to show you some student examples. But you're going to pick an image, and you're going to pick an image that's fairly complex. I want good design exhibited in the image, and I want at least 3 figures in it. And when I say figures, it doesn't have to be a person, but we're going with a realistic photograph. We're not going with the painting this time around. So the picture that you choose can be one of your own as long as the design's good in it. Now, I want you to be thinking of the rule of thirds. What's the rule of thirds? You can't remember. That's okay. I'm going to explain it. Oh, you go ahead.
It's like when if you separate the picture into like thirds, both horizontally and vertically, where the lines intersect, there should be like a subject.
That's exactly right. So when you divide your picture plane into 3 equal portions horizontally and vertically, it creates a grid on top of your image. And where those intersections occur, that's where your focal area should be. Okay. And again, if there's a big thing and a little thing, the bigger thing can come more towards the middle. The little thing can move out towards the end of the picture plane. That makes sense, everybody. So Christina's World, do y'all remember that painting we went over in depth last time? The woman sitting in the field of grass. She was big compared to the farmhouse that was a secondary focal point. The farmhouse was moved out. She was towards the center. That make sense? Okay. So this is a reduction to the essential forms. You're going to take that picture, you're going to reduce it to its essential set of characteristics. You're going to stick to the same layout of your original picture, but you're going to simplify the forms. It's basically a simplification of forms to include in those forms the only things that are necessary to show the form and what that form is. And you're going to eliminate all the other details. Make sense? It will make sense when I show you examples too. I have a lot of really good ones. This is a reduction to essential forms too. This is that same artist. Now it looks like a person sitting on a couch, right? This one's less abstract than the other one, or more representational than the last one. Then the next step is you're going to take that same thing. You're going to think about your reduction to essential forms, but now you're going to start rearranging things a little, and you're going to flatten them out, and then you're going to add pattern to them to create visual interest. So flat shapes and patterns. So here's an example of that. I want more pattern than that. I want like this type of pattern. But you see how the pattern really flattens out that image too? So you can think in terms of flat shapes and patterns. So that's the second step. This is flat shapes and patterns as well. And the patterns in this case are being used to separate foreground, background, and the main figures from the background. Then we're going to do a distortion of space. So you're going to take that original reduction to essential forms. You're going to make things bigger. You're going to make things smaller. You're going to move them around. You can change the camera angle. You can draw it from a different point of view. The world is your oyster. You can do anything you want as long as it's good design. And we're taking our time to do this. We have a couple weeks to do this. So I want you taking your time and really working these things out. I want to see some actual like hard work on this one. This is higher stakes than the previous assignment. Okay, so when we look at this is David Hockney. This is a portrait of his mother. He did a lot of them. But this is photography and it's a distortion of space. Who knows what a vanishing point is? Okay, so when you're drawing and you're using linear perspective, there's vanishing points where lines recede to. And it always equals like, it doesn't always equal the center of the eye line, but the vanishing point and the horizon line, who knows what a horizon line is? The vanishing points all lay around along the horizon line. In this case, the horizon line would be eye level. Horizon line always equals eye level. David Hockney with his camera was going up and down and around. And we even see his feet. So he's changing the horizon line with his camera and pasting all the pictures together. So this is a distortion of space. It's kind of a simplistic distortion of space. It's not as extreme as this one, but it is a distortion of space. Diebenkorn was doing a distortion of space. Okay. Now in this one, this is cubism. Who's ever heard of cubism? Do you know how to define it?
I guess it's just like separating forms into like very square cube shapes.
It does make forms into cube shapes. It squares everything out geometrically, but it goes a little bit more than that. Okay, so cubism is being in an environment, right? Say you're in a room, or say you have a still life set up, and you walk around it and you look at things you like to see in that still life. You can look up at the ceiling too. You can look all around you in that environment. And then you pull those things you like out of it, not putting them in any specific order. You're only putting them in an order of a design, and you're reframing everything and putting it into a picture. So when we look at this, we see this. This could be like a backsplash in the kitchen, right? This could be a tablecloth. These are obviously a magazine sitting somewhere in the room. These are some playing cards. This could be a table, but he's merged it with a guitar, right? That looks like a tack in a board, right? What do you think this looks like?
A little bit of a music feel.
It's got a music feel because of these notes, but what does this look like up here? Yeah, and what do you think that looks like? The sky, and what do you think this is? The top of the building next door, right? I have almost this exact view out of my apartment in San Francisco, so I dig this picture. So what he's done is just rearrange things that he's seeing. The bottle may have been a real bottle, but he flattened it out. He can do whatever he wants. It's his painting. That makes sense? Now, a guy named Picasso, you've all heard of him, right? And a guy named Braque, both were doing cubism at the same time, and they were doing it together because they were exploring cubism. And interesting side note is that they are rumored to have signed each other's paintings. So you don't know what's a Picasso and what's a Braque. And the price difference between a Picasso and a Braque is huge. So it's really hilarious that they did that. I love it when artists play with like worth. Like it's just, it's rebellion at its finest. I dig it. So everybody get cubism? Y'all get distortion of space? Okay, so the next thing you do that picture is arbitrary value. This is another Picasso. There's arbitrary value in here, and it's less arbitrary because it forms a skull too, if you really look at it. But the values are going across forms and through forms to lead you around the picture plane, and this is the better example of it. Okay. And again, when you're in the classroom, you'll probably have questions about arbitrary value. You can ask them. I will help. Okay. And I have many examples to show you in class, and I put some in the shared folder. So that's the fifth step or fourth step. And then the fifth step is going to be spontaneous and expressive execution. Now, what that is you're going to take your scene that you're looking at, and I just want a response to it in an abstract way. You can draw whatever you want.
Can I use color at all?
No, it's all black and white and gray. You can use grays. We don't use color in this class. So, and here's another example of spontaneous and expressive execution. This is another Basquiat. I just love his use of words, and like, it's like that he's looking at all this stuff and it just funnels into him, and then he throws it out on a picture, and it feels really immediate, even though he took time to do it. So that's the end of the slideshow. Let's go through the assignment sheet itself. Hey, can you see that? Okay. So project 2 is abstraction using the elements. What are the elements of art without looking at the sheet?
Line, shape.
We got line, shape, value,
Color is out.
Texture and color.
in this class.
texture, and color. Yeah, color's out in this class, but line, shape, value, texture, color. Now, when you're doing this assignment, you're going to think in that order: line, shape, value, texture. Okay. Line is what you're going to create your shapes with. Value is how you're going to kind of help to arrange things on the picture plane. And then texture you think of as detail. Okay. And you've got to think of them in that order. I want everybody to have their sketchbooks out when they're working on this assignment. You're going to work in a sketchbook first to figure out little layouts, except for maybe the first step. And I'll explain that in a few minutes. Does that make sense? We're going to go through the proper design. We're going to do thumbnails. We're going to do a rough, and then we're going to do a finished design. That's the way you should be designing things. So you're working out your ideas, the basic ideas in thumbnail form. And then when you go to your final, you're going to make a rough version of that design in case you have to make any changes. And then you're going to do the cleanup. Okay. We have about 12 hours to work on this in class. So we're going to take that 12 hours and really work it out. Cool. Everybody with me? Okay. So we're going to use the line, shape, value, texture, and color. And we're going to use the organizing principles that we went over in the second slideshow. And we're going to move from realism, which is your original photograph, to non-objective abstraction. Okay. Non-pictorial representation, which is realism. And the title is going to be abstraction. So it says find a painting or a photograph. You can use a painting as long as it's realism, but I'd rather you find a photograph, because then you have to think more abstractly about it. Because painting, no matter how realistic it is already abstracting a little bit. Has to have at least 3 figures and some background, which is interesting, and an interesting composition. Pay attention to the compositional rules that we learned on the first project. There has to be a good focal point, good placement of things, good directional forces. You can think about value. You can think about psychic line. You can play with that in your abstraction, especially once you get to patterns. You could add arrows. Like, it'd be fun to do that, right? To show directions, but you could put any kind of pattern in there. So you're going to make a few copies black and white, but you're going to draw these things. So like, make a few copies of your original photo so you can wreck one accidentally, but you're going to have to put one on the final board, because we're putting it on a board like we did in the first assignment. Okay. You're going to make thumbnails to prepare for the final pieces, and you're experimental with multiple designs. I don't want you to just go with your first thought. That's lazy design. I want you to like really work at this. Okay. So you got to pay attention to the format of the artwork. So when you affix your original 5 additional images, you have a harmonious arrangement of those images on the board. It's got to be a neat presentation that looks balanced. Okay. So copy one is the original piece that's used for reference. Drawing one, you're going to reduce it to its essential forms. Okay. So you're going to take your image and you're going to reduce it to an essential set of characteristics. The second drawing is going to be a progression towards flat shapes and patterns. The third one's going to be a distortion of space. The fourth one is going to be arbitrary value. You're going to move towards arbitrary value. And the final one is a spontaneous and expressive execution. And you recall me going through all that stuff, right? I just did it, so I hope it's fresh. So these are the supplies you're going to use for the piece. I don't want the finals to be in computer, but you could certainly do like thumbnails in Procreate or something like that if you have a iPad. Or you can do it on your computer if you have Photoshop or Illustrator. Any questions about that? Okay, so I'm going to show you some student examples right now, and I'll point out some really good ones. Okay. And I have more. This is my favorite assignment to give because I think people do really good work on it. But I'm gonna close it. I'm going to share my screen with you. Can you all see it? Can you all see it clearly? Okay. So who's afraid to draw in here? Anybody afraid to draw? If you have any fear of drawing, don't worry, because this guy had a fear of drawing too, and I think he did a pretty good job on it. So you'll see the reduction to essential forms. You see how he eliminated faces because the expressions weren't important on the faces? Now, when he did this, he's reducing it to essential forms. He's playing with value. What's the focal point of the picture? What part of him sitting on the stairs? His face, right? Yeah, so I think it has a strong focal point. There's good directional forces. The flat shapes and patterns could be better, and I'll show you better examples of that. His distortion of space is good and it's funny. He's just distorting the space completely. Arbitrary value is not that good, and I'll show you some better examples. And then you see that spontaneous execution. Some people choose to do cartoons, and I know there's a couple people in here that are interested in comic books. Now, when you look at a cartoon figure, that's a reduction to essential forms. So that's pure abstraction. It's really good abstraction when good character designers are doing it. Make sense so far? That's an excellent reduction to essential forms. Now, when I'm talking about reduction to essential forms, you're going to look at your original picture. And in this first step, you can put a piece of tracing paper over it directly and start tracing out what you think is essential to what we're looking at. So when he shows this, he sees that haircut as the essential form in the picture. Y'all see that? And I agree. I think it stands out nicely. And it's a really good essential form. I think he missed out on the cigarette. Because basically these are punk rockers or like that type of people. And we're supposed to see the punk rock aspects. I also think the writing on this, the roof keep off, this writing is not that important, but I think this shows the rebellion. You all agree? So I think he could have included those things in there. Again, I think there's not enough flat shapes and patterns in here. He kind of just took the same one. The arbitrary value, he got rid of the line work and used value to carry us throughout. So I think that's a pretty good job of it. Okay. Distortion of space, it's all right. It could be a little further. And then this one's just kind of funny. That last step, as long as the design's good, anything goes. You can't get a bad grade on it as long as you concentrate on the design. It's just your response to the picture. And he made it kind of goofy. This one's amazing. This is by a guy named Jamie Limbers. He's a ceramicist. He works in Grand Rapids and he has a lot of stuff. He sells a lot of stuff. So the reduction to essential forms. When he's looking at the essential forms, he's looking for what he sees in the picture. Now on the Bride of Frankenstein, her hair, right? That stripe in her hair. And he's represented that. So and on Frankenstein himself, the bolts in the neck, right? And then that bottle's really obvious to the picture in the window behind. And then he's just kind of playing with the brick shapes in the back. I don't know if those are brick shapes. Oh, that's not a window. That's a beaker or something. I don't know what you would call that. A dome of glass. How about that? Now look at his flat shapes and patterns. He separated a lot of these shapes to flatten out the picture plane so you don't see that overlap. But he's also put beautiful pattern in the background. And he's played with the values as well. But it feels pretty flat, right? Y'all with me? Everybody with me online too? Then the distortion of space, he changed the point of view and he kind of has them taking a selfie. And then arbitrary value. He made representational value in here that's separate from the image itself. It's kind of like Picasso did with that skull. But he's using the lightning bolt, which kind of represents Frankenstein, to the bolt itself. So she's the lightning that inspires Frankenstein, right? So he's telling a story with that picture. And it's really well thought out. And then the spontaneous expressive execution, that one's way out there. But it refers to the original image, so it's perfectly fine. Make sense? Now this guy, he was just taking the class for fun. He wasn't an art major, but he did some nice work here too. I really like his distortion of space. I think it's really good. And I think his reduction to essential forms is important or good. And the thing here is he decided to put the details on the face because they're smiling and he's trying to show that they're happy. And then like every soccer game's a party. I don't know what that's supposed to be. This young lady wanted to do the Beatles. My favorite one is the distortion of space over here on the right. And this is the original image for it. Making sense? This is Jessie Hook. She owns her own graphic design business in Grand Rapids. She took this class like 10 years ago. She did I Love Lucy. Now, the reduction to essential forms, the steering wheel is really important, right? It's an obvious form in the picture. And we have the different characters and their smiles. And then she gets a feeling of love for it, so she's representing that in the flat shapes and patterns. Arbitrary value is okay. It carries us throughout the picture plane, and it's a repetition of the wheel. I think it could be taken a little further. Distortion of space, she changed the angle on the camera, and it works just fine. And then spontaneous and expressive execution, they're hearts, right? It's representing the scene and the friendship. Now, the cool thing about this is they're really quick and easy to reach. The design is excellent as far as the simplicity and reducing it to a central set of characteristics that's easy and clear to read. Now, if you're going to be a graphic designer, you want something that'll read quickly and clearly. There's some good ones in this. I like the distortion of space quite a bit. I like the reduction to essential forms, and I think these three at the bottom are all really good. I think this is good pattern, but I think the arrangement could be a little more concise. I think the arbitrary value carries you back and forth, so it's okay. This one's excellent as far as distortion of space goes. You see how he's using those organic figures, but he kind of ran them together. That really doesn't represent this scene that much, but he's responding to this image and making this image out of it, and I think it's really good. I love this one. Now, when you're bringing value in, who got the gray markers? Everybody get the gray markers in the kit? You can use value. She used pencil, but you can use the gray marker as well in place of the pencil. I don't care if you use pencil either, as long as the shading is pretty consistent. But I think the reduction to essential forms is really good on this one. I think the flat shapes and patterns is quite interesting. One thing about the pattern, though, it's not that balanced out because this is a really recognizable pattern and it's all on the right side of the picture plane. So I would have given this a little bit of a friend over here to balance it out. I would have put that same pattern over here a little bit. Distortion of space is really good and really weird. Arbitrary value is probably the one I don't like on that this much, but it's still okay. See how she's running the value between forms? But she did with the value create really good divisions in space, so you can recognize those things. And then expressive execution, she really responded to that phase, so I think she did an excellent job with that one. This is Kelsey DeBoer. Really nice, simple, and easy to read designs. And I think the arbitrary value is pretty good in this one. Dogs playing poker. Everybody knows that painting, right? I think the essential forms is great. I love the distortion of space. This is really good. She almost turned it into a film or a comic, right? I think this could be a little better. And this expressive execution is awesome. Dog biscuit poker chips, right? With cards. So you can see how this relates to this, and I think it's pretty great. So that's what you're going to be doing for this next assignment. Does that make sense to everybody? Anybody have any questions about it? Anybody at all? All right, so for the rest of the day, what I want you to do, for the people at home, you're going to be looking up your images and picking out a good image. I don't want you to start working on this. Lydia, it can be any photo. It doesn't have to be popular. It can be even a photo that you took, as long as the design's good on it. I do want to approve the photos you pick, though. So if you're at home picking them out today, pick 2 or 3 that you can show me next time, okay? So we have a few to choose from in case one won't work. For the people in class, we're going to look them up on the computer today or on your own device. And if you get them all picked out, we'll go into the classroom and start working on them. But I don't want the people at home to start working on yours today because I want to be there when you're doing the reduction to essential forms, okay? Plus the due dates are staggered, so the people in class will be working on it in class. Any questions?
Does it have to be a real photo?
Well, it has to be realistic. So if you do a
Realistic.
painting, it's got to be a totally realistic looking painting, because you're abstracting it. And if you were going like right to a cartoon or a comic book picture, that's already abstracted slightly.
All right.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Any other questions? So again, when you print them out, you want to be able to fit 5 of the same size on your board. So your board is 15 by 20. So you got to do a little math to make sure it'll fit. But you should have encountered that a little on the first assignment. So you'll see how big they have to be. And then that's what you have to do for the day. Any questions? Now, as a reminder, at the end of the slideshow, I'm going to put those check-ins for next week up. And I'll send a message out when they're active so you can check in, okay? Any questions about anything? Any questions about the first assignment? All right, so we're not going to critique the first assignment, but this one will be doing critiques for each group in the classroom. So we're going to talk about them, and everybody's going to see them. So I want you to do your best work. I'm trying to be a cheerleader here.
I have a question about the first assignment.
Okay.
The presentation, that one goes over the last step, right?
If you're having trouble with the last step, we can do it in the classroom when you're in the classroom next time.
Okay.
Because like for half the class, I ran through it, but the other class, I ran through it with both classes. But you weren't able to come that day, so that's fine. Just come on in and we'll do it here.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions? So I expect this to be done on critique day. And I'm sure you'll all do very well at it. So this video with the slideshow and everything will be put up online with a repetition of what we're the handout of the assignment. Also, the assignment folder with the assignment sheet in it and the examples are on the hard drive. So I already put them up there. And the slideshow is up on Blackboard. I will be posting this video to Blackboard as well. It's got to render out before I do it. Any questions about anything? All right, so everybody get to work and I will see, is group 1 in class or group 2 today? Are you good? Okay, I'll see group 2 on, what day is it? Thursday. Yeah, I'll see group 2 on Tuesday. Cool? All right. Have a good day, everybody.